I spent over $100,000 on a single Thanksgiving dinner, private chefs, first-class flights, lavish gifts. It sounds insane, I know. But it was my calculated response to the single 10-word text my mother sent to tell me I wasn't invited. My name is Sandra, and I'm 42 years old. From the outside, my life is the American dream fulfilled, the Austin tech scene, a company built from scratch, the kind of success people write articles about. But none of that mattered on a cold Tuesday in November, when my phone buzzed with a message that felt like the summary of my entire life. I was in my high-rise office, overlooking the city skyline, when I saw my mother's name, Dolores, flash on the screen. The text was brutally simple, almost casual in its cruelty. Sandra, about Thanksgiving this year. Richard and I decided we need something quieter. Just Sharon, her husband, and the kids. We know you'll understand. Understand. That word hung in the air. I was meant to understand being disposable. I was meant to understand my place always on the outside, looking in at the perfect little family my older sister, Sharon, had created. For 30 years, I had accepted that role. I was the quiet one, the career-driven daughter who lived 1,500 miles away, the convenient excuse for keeping things small. A familiar coldness settled over me, but this time, it wasn't sadness, it was clarity. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, a dozen angry, pleading responses dying before they were ever typed. In the end, I wrote back one word: perfect. The feeling of being erased by the people who are supposed to see you most clearly. It's a specific kind of quiet pain. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your own family, just type the city you're watching from in the comments. Let's see how far this silent strength of ours reaches. They thought they were closing a door. They had no idea I was about to open a gate to a world they couldn't even imagine. I set my phone down on the cold marble of my desk, the single word perfect glowing on the screen. There was no anger, no storm of emotion. Instead, a profound stillness settled over me. It was the quiet hum of a massive engine finally turning over. For years, I had been playing a game with rules written by my parents, Richard and Dolores, where my sister Sharon always won. That text message wasn't just an uninvitation, it was their final move in a game I had just decided to quit. I swiveled in my chair, away from the glittering Austin skyline, and turned to the fireproof safe tucked behind a bookshelf. Inside, beneath files detailing stock portfolios and investment properties, was a leather-bound folio. I laid it on my desk. The embossed title read, "The Hemlock Estate, Manchester, Vermont." I flipped it open to the deed. A $5 million purchase, paid in cash last spring. 50 acres of birch forest, a 7-bedroom main house dating back to the 1922nd, and a view of the green mountains that could make you believe in God. I had bought it as a sanctuary, a quiet monument to the success they never cared to ask about. But in that moment, seeing their dismissive text next to this document of immense private power, the property transformed. My sanctuary was about to become my stage. In every family, there are roles we're given: the star, the fixer, the forgotten one. Let me know in the comments, were you ever the scapegoat too? Type savior if you were always the fixer. Or star if you were always the golden child. I want to see the balance in our community. My role had always been clear. But now, I was about to write a new script for all of us. To understand the script I was about to write, you have to understand the one I was born into. We grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, in a grand, 3-story house south of Broad Street, where history wasn't just in the past, it was a guest at the dinner table. Our family wasn't just a family, it was a legacy. And in that legacy, there were 2 daughters, each cast in an unshakable role. My older sister, Sharon, was the star. She was the quintessential Southern belle, born with a grace that seemed to bend the humid Charleston air around her. She was homecoming queen, the captain of the tennis team, and she married a handsome banker right out of college. My parents, Richard and Dolores, saw her as their masterpiece, a perfect reflection of their values of tradition, charm, and social standing. Then there was me. I wasn't a reflection, I was a refraction. While Sharon was learning the art of the perfect dinner party, I was in my room, taking apart our desktop computer and teaching myself to code. My world was one of logic gates and binary code, a language my parents found baffling and, I suspect, a little embarrassing. I remember one Sunday dinner, shortly after I'd gotten a full scholarship to the engineering program at UT Austin. The entire 2-hour meal was devoted to a microscopic analysis of Sharon's new diamond earrings. When I finally found a pause to mention my scholarship, a ticket to a top 10 engineering school in the country, my father simply nodded, smiled politely, and said, "Well, that's nice, dear." Then he turned back to Sharon. "Now, tell us again what the jeweler said about the clarity." It wasn't hatred, it was worse. It was a profound indifference that made me invisible. And invisibility gives you a strange kind of power. It lets you build an empire in the shadows while everyone else is admiring the crown. But being invisible doesn't just mean your accomplishments are ignored. It means your resources are seen as available. When you're not truly seen as an individual, your boundaries become suggestions. My maternal grandmother, a sharp, practical woman who saw the spark in me, had left me a college fund. It was $50,000, set aside in a trust, untouchable until my 18th birthday. It was my ticket out, my key to the world of engineering and technology that I craved. A few months before Sharon's wedding, my parents sat me down in the formal living room, the one reserved for important conversations. They called it a loan. They said the venue deposit was higher than expected and the florist was charging a fortune. "It's just for a few months, Sandra," my father Richard assured me, his voice smooth and confident. "We're family, we help each other out. You'll get it all back, with interest, after the wedding." I was young, and I still believed in the myth of our family. I signed the papers. The wedding was a spectacular Charleston affair, written up in the society pages. And the loan? It was never mentioned again. A year later, when I gently brought it up, my mother Dolores looked at me with genuine offense. "Don't be so transactional, dear," she'd said. "It all comes out of the same family pot." Except it didn't. It came from my pot, and it forced me to work 3 separate jobs through all 4 years of college to cover the shortfall. That betrayal taught me everything. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. If you've ever had to fight for what you were owed, not just the money, but the respect, this space is for you. Subscribe and join a community of people who know that building your own success is the ultimate power. That was the last time I ever asked them for anything. I would build my own pot, and I would make it so deep they couldn't even see the bottom. And I did build it. For the next 20 years, I poured every ounce of myself into my work, brick by painful brick. But the deeper my pot of success got, the more determined they seemed to be to pretend it was just a puddle. The final illusion of hope shattered last year at my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. It was a lavish affair at a country club in Charleston, the kind of event my mother lived for. I flew in from Austin, leaving my team in the middle of a critical product launch, because a small, foolish part of me still thought that, maybe this time, it would be different. My father, Richard, stood up to give a toast, his voice echoing over the manicured lawns. He spoke eloquently about his legacy, his beautiful wife, and his pride in his family. He raised his glass to my sister. "To Sharon," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who blessed us with 3 wonderful grandchildren and stayed here in Charleston to carry on our family's traditions." The crowd of 100 guests applauded warmly. Then, his eyes scanned the room and landed on me, almost as an afterthought. He gave a slight, dismissive chuckle. "And to Sandra," he announced, the tone shifting entirely. "She's out there in Texas, doing something with computers." A few people tittered politely. "We're just so proud she's figuring things out on her own." In that moment, under the soft glow of the party lights, he had reduced my entire life's work into a quirky hobby. He didn't just ignore my success, he publicly framed it as a failure to conform. The polite applause felt like stones hitting my skin. It was then I knew. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. I was looking for a reckoning. So while my father was toasting my quaint little hobby in Charleston, what was that something with computers I was actually doing in Austin? I was in the final stages of negotiating the sale of my cybersecurity firm, a company I had started 10 years prior in a sweltering, rented garage that always smelled faintly of gasoline. That company was built on a foundation of 100-hour work weeks, a diet that consisted mostly of cheap tacos and stale coffee, and a relentless, soul-crushing belief in my own code. While my sister Sharon was picking out draperies for her new sunroom, I was fighting off patent trolls and surviving market downturns that wiped dozens of my competitors off the map. While my parents were admiring pictures of my nephew's first day of school, I was closing deals in London and Singapore, growing my two-person startup into a global force with over 300 employees. They saw a daughter who had failed to come home. The world saw a CEO who was redefining the future of digital security. Last spring, one of the largest tech conglomerates on the planet made me an offer. The negotiations were brutal, lasting for months. When the dust settled, I sat alone in a sterile boardroom and signed the final piece of paper. The acquisition price was $500 million. There was no applause, no proud father giving a toast. There was only the quiet scratch of a pen and the silent, earth-shattering shift of power. The money was never the point. The money was the ammunition. It was the key to a kind of freedom they couldn't comprehend, and the foundation for the reckoning they never saw coming. So with $500 million in the bank and my mother's dismissive text burning a hole on my screen, what do? Do you get angry? Do you book a lonely vacation to a beach somewhere? Number. You get strategic. My first call wasn't to my parents to plead my case. It was to my cousin Wendy, my mother's niece, who had always been the family's unofficial truth teller. After I told her about the text, she went quiet for a moment. "That's funny," she said. "My mom got a call last week. Aunt Dolores said Uncle Richard wasn't feeling well and they were canceling the big gathering this year." A knot formed in my stomach. I spent the next hour making calls. To my Uncle Paul, who was told they were renovating the kitchen. To another cousin, who was told they just wanted a quiet year with the grandkids. A clear, ugly pattern emerged. This wasn't about keeping it small, it was a purge. Anyone who wasn't in my sister Sharon's perfect, immediate orbit had been surgically removed from the guest list. It was Wendy who finally sighed in defeat. "Well, I guess Thanksgiving is canceled for the rest of us this year." And that's when the entire plan, fully formed and glorious, clicked into place in my mind. I started to laugh. "Oh no, Wendy," I said, the strategy crystallizing with every word. "We're not canceling Thanksgiving, we're upgrading it." It's a powerful feeling, isn't it? Taking a moment of rejection and deciding to build something better in its place. Let me know in the comments, have you ever had to create your own holiday, your own celebration, when the traditional one wasn't an option for you? I hung up the phone, opened a new group chat titled Thanksgiving, The Upgrade, and began adding every single person who had been cast aside. The game was officially on. The group chat lit up like a Christmas tree. First came the confusion. "Sandra, you have a house in Vermont?" Then, I dropped a link to a private photo gallery of the estate. Silence. A minute later, my cousin Wendy's all-caps reply came through. "What is happening? I am so in." That opened the floodgates. The next 3 weeks became a logistical operation that would have rivaled one of my company's product launches. This wasn't going to be a simple potluck dinner, this was going to be a performance. My mother's specialty was exclusion, making her world smaller. My specialty was scaling operations. I chartered a Gulfstream G280 to pick up the family scattered from Charleston all the way up to Boston. There would be no excuses about last-minute flight prices. For the culinary experience, I flew in a James Beard award-winning chef from New York City, a man famous for his revolutionary take on American classics. My only instruction to him was, create a Thanksgiving meal that will be talked about for a generation. While he planned the menu, I planned the experience. Every guest received a welcome package a week in advance with cashmere travel blankets and personalized itineraries. I knew my Uncle Paul loved bourbon, so I had a local Vermont distillery create a custom small batch bottle for his room. Wendy's kids loved to draw, so I hired a local art teacher to run a craft workshop for them all weekend. My mother's method was a single, dismissive text. Mine was meticulous, overwhelming, personalized care. I wasn't just hosting a dinner. I was building a temporary kingdom, and I was making damn sure it was a memorable one. Thanksgiving Day at the estate was something out of a magazine. A light snow dusted the pine trees, the fireplace crackled, and the house was filled with the sounds of laughter from family who hadn't seen each other in years. It was warm, it was joyful, it was perfect. But the main event, for me, wasn't the perfectly roasted turkey or the heartfelt reunions. It was scheduled for exactly 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it was going to take place on a battlefield my parents didn't even know they were on. Social media. I had hired a professional videographer, telling everyone it was to capture the memories. His real job was to create a single, devastatingly beautiful 1-minute video. Just before dinner, I pulled my cousin Wendy into the library. She's the most tech-savvy of my relatives, with an Instagram following that rivals a small town's population. I handed her a small, unmarked USB drive. "On this drive," I said, my voice low and steady, "is a video. It features Chef Antoine unveiling the 20-pound black truffle stuffed turkey. It has sweeping shots of the 30-foot dining table, the crystal glasses, and the faces of 35 people having the time of their lives." I looked at my watch. At exactly 7 p.m., right when they'll be sitting down to their quiet little dinner in Charleston, I want you to post it. Tag Mom, Dad, Sharon, tag everyone. And use the hashtag #Vermont upgrade. This is the part I love, the strategy. Some people react with emotion, others with a plan. So let me ask you, are you a strategist or a reactor? Type plan in the comments if you're the type to build a spreadsheet for your revenge, or type passion if you just go straight for the confrontation. Wendy looked from the drive back to me, and a slow, wicked grin spread across her face. "Oh, Sandra," she whispered. "This is going to be better than dessert." The digital time bomb was set. As we were all being seated in the grand dining room, a sudden hush fell over the house. The cheerful chatter died down, replaced by a confused silence. I looked up and saw that the massive front door had swung open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the cold Vermont twilight. Standing there, leaning lightly on an elegant silver-handled cane, was my grandmother, Agnes. At 88 years old, Agnes was the undisputed matriarch of our family, a woman whose quiet disapproval could silence my father more effectively than any argument. But she wasn't supposed to be here. She lived in Charleston, and the official story from my mother was that she was too frail to travel, that she would be having a quiet meal with them. I felt my heart stop. For a second, I thought she had come as an emissary from my parents, to scold me for fracturing the family. I stood up and walked towards her, the eyes of all 35 guests following me. She ignored everyone else, her sharp, clear eyes locking onto mine. She took in the scene: the roaring fire, the crystal chandeliers, the tables groaning with food, and a slow smile spread across her face. She reached out a frail, steady hand and placed it on my cheek. "Well now," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, loud enough for all to hear. "A queen always belongs at the grandest court. And tonight, Sandra, this is it." She then explained that she had faked a debilitating headache an hour before their dinner, and had her caregiver drive her straight to the Charleston airport to catch a flight she'd secretly booked a week ago. Her arrival wasn't just a surprise, it was a strategic defection. It was a formal declaration that the family's old guard had just allied with the new. The game had changed entirely. The explosion happened precisely at 7:45 p.m., right as Chef Antoine was presenting the dessert course, a stunning array of pumpkin cheesecakes and apple tarts. My phone, which I had placed face up on the table beside my plate, began to vibrate violently. It was a call from my mother. I excused myself, walked into the quiet library with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and answered, putting the call on speaker. Her voice was not calm. It was a high-pitched shriek of fury. "What have you done, Sandra? What is all over Facebook? Are you trying to humiliate your sister?" I let her finish, the silence in the grand library amplifying her frantic accusations. "Mom," I said, my own voice unnervingly steady, "I'm not doing anything but hosting Thanksgiving for the family members that you and Dad decided weren't important enough to include this year. I didn't create this division. I just set a nicer table for the people you cast aside." That's when I heard my father's booming voice grab the phone. "Don't you dare use that tone. This is a childish, spiteful display, Sandra. After everything we have given you." Everything they had given me. That was the line. That was the opening I had been waiting for my entire adult life. I paused, letting his hypocrisy hang in the air between Vermont and South Carolina. "Given me?" I asked, my voice as cold and clear as the winter air outside. "Dad, are we talking about the emotional support? Or are we talking about the $50,000 college fund that paid for the peonies at Sharon's wedding?" There's a unique power in finally saying the one thing that everyone knows, but no one has ever had the courage to speak. It just hangs in the air, undeniable. Let me know. Have you ever had that one truth that your family just pretends doesn't exist? Type truth in the comments if you've ever had to be the one to finally say it out loud. The other end of the line went completely silent. For the first time in his life, I had rendered my father speechless. The silence on the other end of the line was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lifetime of carefully constructed denial shattering into a million pieces. I was about to speak again, to press the advantage, when a soft tap on the library door made me turn. My grandmother, Agnes, stood there, her expression unreadable. She had followed me from the dining room. With a deliberate slowness, she walked towards me, pointed a single, steady finger at my phone, and said, "Is that my son you're speaking to? Put him on speaker." A mother's work is never done. I did as she asked, my own plan suddenly feeling like a child's game. Her voice, when it came through the phone's speaker, was nothing like my father's blustering rage or my mother's frantic shrieks. It was calm, measured, and carried the weight of absolute authority. "Richard, Dolores. This is your mother," she began, leaving no room for interruption. "I have been a silent witness to your foolishness for decades. I have watched you worship one daughter while you have completely ignored the immense value of the other." She paused, letting the words sink in. "That silence ends tonight. I will be calling my estate lawyer first thing in the morning. I am restructuring my will. My entire estate, valued at $200 million, will be placed into a new trust." Another pause, this one even more chilling. The sole trustee of that fund, the only person with the authority to manage and distribute it, will be Sandra. It's high time this family's future was in the hands of the one person who knows how to build one, instead of just coasting on the past. A sharp intake of breath on the line. Then, click. They were gone. The game was over. My grandmother simply patted my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the seismic shift she had just caused, and we returned to the party. The rest of the evening passed in a joyful blur, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying that final, deafening click from the phone. The war I had been fighting my whole life, mostly inside my own head, had just ended in a stunning, unconditional surrender. Later that night, long after the last guest had retired and the house had settled into a deep, peaceful quiet, I sat alone in the library. My phone, silent for hours, began to light up. It wasn't with calls, but with the white flags of text messages. The first was from a number I barely recognized as my sister's. The message was stripped of all her usual polished charm. "I have always been jealous of you, Sandra, your freedom, your brilliance. I took comfort in being the favorite because it was the only area where I felt I could win. I am so sorry." It was the most honest thing she had said to me in our entire lives. Then, a text from my father. "Your grandmother is right. We haven't been fair. I am proud of you." And finally, from my mother, the simplest and most telling message of all. "The house looks beautiful in the photos. Perhaps we could visit sometime. It's complicated, isn't it? The relationship with the people who are supposed to be your biggest allies, especially siblings. If you have one, type Ollie in the comments if they're your rock, or just type Raval if it's a little more complicated than that. No judgment here, this is a safe space." I didn't reply to any of them. I just sat there, watching the fire die down, realizing the board had been cleared. The old game was over. Now I had to decide what the new one would look like. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas were quiet. The dust from the explosion settled, leaving an unfamiliar landscape in its wake. I returned to Austin, and the calls from my parents started. They were tentative, awkward conversations, where they'd ask about my work with a forced interest that was almost painful to hear. They were trying, in their clumsy way, to navigate this new world where I held all the maps. My first instinct for Christmas was to retreat. To fill my Vermont estate with my chosen family, the friends who had been my bedrock for years, and lock the gates to the past. The idea of seeing my parents and sister felt like inviting a storm into my newfound peace. Why risk it? It was my grandmother Agnes, during one of our weekly calls, who gave me the clarity I needed. "Revenge is a door you kick open, Sandra," she said, her voice as wise as it was old. "But you can't stand in the doorway forever. Eventually, you have to decide whether to walk through to see what's on the other side, or simply burn the whole house down behind you." Her words stuck with me. Burning it all down felt easy. Seeing what came next felt brave. So, I sent the invitation. Not an email, but a formal, embossed card sent by courier. It was for my parents and Sharon only. No husbands, no children. Just the original four of us, for 3 days at the Vermont estate. This wasn't an olive branch offered from a place of weakness. It was a summons, a command performance on my stage, under my rules. They accepted within the hour. As I booked their first-class flights, I knew this Christmas wouldn't be about forgiveness. It would be about seeing if there was anything left to build from the wreckage. Their arrival was as quiet and fragile as the December snow falling outside. When they stepped out of the car, they looked small against the backdrop of the massive estate. For the first 2 days, we moved around each other like strangers, the air thick with unspoken words. The tour of the house was the turning point. When my father stood in my office, staring at the framed Forbes magazine cover with my face on it, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not pride, but a profound sense of bewilderment, as if realizing he'd been reading the wrong book his entire life. The real conversation happened on Christmas Eve, in the library, with no one but the four of us and the crackling fire. There were no theatrics, just quiet, painful truths. Sharon, looking me in the eye for the first time as an equal, admitted that her whole life had been a performance designed to win a prize she was terrified I would steal. My father confessed that it was easier to dismiss my career than to admit he simply didn't understand it. And my mother, through tears, admitted she had failed me. "We were supposed to be your home," she whispered. "Instead, we made you build your own." I didn't offer them easy forgiveness. It wasn't mine to give yet. I just listened, and for the first time, I felt heard. "Thank you for telling me the truth," was all I said. It wasn't a happy ending written in the stars. It was a fragile, difficult beginning, forged in the fire of a Thanksgiving that had burned the old world down. The revenge wasn't the party, or the money, or even the power. The revenge was this moment, forcing the people who had made me feel invisible to finally open their eyes and see me. So, what is the lesson at the end of a story like this? It's easy to look at the lavish party, the private jet, and the stunning shift in my grandmother's will and call it a story of revenge. And in a way, it island. But the most powerful family revenge stories aren't truly about payback. They aren't about watching the world of those who hurt you burn. The ultimate revenge is building your own world so beautifully, so completely, that their world and their approval no longer hold any power over you. The justice I found wasn't in their apology texts, born from a fear of being cut off. The real justice, the real karma, was in the quiet moment my father looked at my achievements and realized he was a stranger to his own daughter's life. That was the consequence of their choice to look away. Family is a complicated, messy, and powerful thing. It can be the source of our deepest wounds, but it can also be the place where we learn to heal. For me, that healing couldn't begin until a new foundation of truth and respect was laid, even if I had to be the one to pour the concrete myself. Forgiveness isn't a simple word. It's a long, winding road that can only be traveled after the truth has been brought into the light. It's not about erasing the past, but about refusing to let it define your future. What began with a painful exclusion ended up being the greatest gift they ever gave me. The freedom to build my own traditions, to define family on my own terms, and to finally, fully, see myself. If you believe in the power of writing your own story, of building your own table when you're not offered a seat at theirs, then this community is for you. Subscribe and join us, because every story shared here is a testament to our collective strength. Thank you for listening.